Today we have an amazing guest today, Dr. Summer and Nicole. I'm super grateful to have you here. How's it going?
Thank you so much for having me. Going great, thanks.
Yeah, so I'm very curious myself. What's the spark that got you into all this healing work with yoga and somatic therapy and Reiki, all this stuff? What was your hero's journey?
That's a big question. I would say I would say that for me, I was the only thing I really liked right out of college was yoga. And so I went and studied yoga. That was my very first thing out of all the things that are under my belt at this point. And was very interested. It was once I was learning little bits of anatomy in my yoga training, I realized I had just an affinity for learning about the body because I just felt it was so applicable to me and everyone else. And and so I actually went into my doctorate is in physical therapy. I was really interested to get to the root of people's pain. And I lasted about 3.5 years in an orthopedic clinic, and just it became very clear to me that people's physical pain, there was a massive psychosomatic component, nervous system component that was just missing from my Western science education. And I felt like I didn't have the tools, to address what could really help someone, could really help get to the root of people's pain, because I could see it had to do with trauma. I could see it had to do with, chronic nervous system dysregulation. And so I needed more tools, to be able to treat that. And I kind of stopped after about 3.5 years in the orthopedic clinic, and then spent the next, gosh, like 17 years, I would say, filling in the gaps of what I thought was left out of physical therapy school. And that led me to, studying the energy body and the emotional body, and trauma's effect, on the body, and studying the nervous system, and going into really a rabbit hole of studying polyvagal theory, and which is the most recent research of how we know the nervous system to work. That work got very real for me in around 2020, whenever I went through pretty traumatic divorce and my system was going into chronic freeze responses. And so I very much needed to learn how to unfreeze my nervous system. And I felt like, even though I'd studied neuroscience, in this Western science education, I still needed more, more training. And so I went down the rabbit hole of all things Dr. Stephen Porges and the polyvagal theory, and studying the vagus nerve to really understand how the nervous system works, and kind of how to unfreeze my own system, and how to build, capacity in the nervous system again, after a lot of trauma. So
Yeah,
yeah, that's a sum up of it, you could say.
yeah, that's awesome. So you started out like in the Western medicine, you realized that maybe not have the tools you want to do for what you're here to do, and so you kind of branched off from there. Is that right?
Yeah.
Awesome. So first up, I would like to talk about yoga because I know that's one of the big things that you do. So how did you get started in that, and what is the benefits that you see in people and people that you work with in terms of that?
Let's see, yoga is it's such a it was the first thing that I studied out of everything. So it was I was a yoga teacher before I was a therapist. And it's interesting now that I look at it, because now I see, even I was attracted to yoga. It was like an embodiment practice that would help me feel good, where I was very disconnected from my body, from my own, childhood trauma for a long time. And the breath work and the meditation and just the movement helped me develop felt sense. It helped me come into my body, whereas, I was more dissociated before, and it helped me come into a more healthy level of embodiment. And for a while, I think when I was very much more physical therapy, biomechanically minded, I was very into more hatha yoga, all things like alignment based yoga and therapeutic yoga, like how to heal injuries. I was very into that part of it. And then around, I think it's 2013, I found Kundalini yoga, when I was living in Encinitas, California. And that, I know now, is yoga for the energy body. And so I now use Kundalini for, I'll use quick techniques, like 2 or 3 Kundalini techniques, to help someone clear their energy, calm the mind, and then help them go deeper into levels of meditation. And I remember when I was studying Kundalini, it didn't make a lot of sense to my PT brain at the time. There was no real alignment. There was no real the sequencing didn't make sense to me. I just kind of had to put everything I knew aside, and because I realized I felt so good after every class. And once I started to use it in the way that I use it now, which is just, the work that I do now is taking people into nervous system work, and it's called somatic reparenting. So different meditations to help them connect them to the inner child. So I'll just use the Kundalini techniques, usually 2 or 3 of them, before a deeper meditation process, because Kundalini is so good at regulating the system. It actually, a lot of the mantra and the repetitive movement in Kundalini, it activates the vagus nerve. And I know that now. I didn't know that when I was studying Kundalini, but once I started to study the nervous system, I was like, oh, I get why Kundalini works so well now.
Yeah, that makes sense. Because like, is it true or not that like here, like in the Western culture, we primarily do like yoga as type of like a workout where it's more of like we see like in the gym or whatnot instead of like more of this energy body work? Is that kind of what most people are doing?
It's all over the board. I think people use it in a lot of different ways. But yeah, in general, it's like people come to yoga because they want the physical effects. They want the yoga body, so to speak, or they want to become more flexible. And then a lot of people, I think, are attracted to it for that, but then once they start actually practicing, they realize it's actually its own, it's its own body
Yeah,
of work. And it's the intention. I think intention is everything. What you're coming to your practice for. If you're coming to your practice to kind of like work your body out, like that's going to have a certain effect. If you're coming to the practice for centering and grounding and regulating your nervous system, it's a very different intention, so it will sort of shape the practice.
that makes sense because yoga is like mind, body, and spirit, right? So kind of like as a parallel, like setting intention for how we do everything, like setting the practice, it's going to have a big impact on the outcome. Would you agree with that?
Totally. Yeah, like with anything in life, intention is it will shape the journey for sure.
Definitely. If
Mhm.
people like wanted to start a yoga practice, like how would they start with that? Is there like certain modalities that you start with based on their certain health status or intention, or how does that work?
Can you ask me the question again?
Yeah, sure. So if people are starting to get into yoga, it's really intriguing to them. Like, where do they start? And like, what are some points so they can just pick up like some fundamentals or something like that?
I would say to go to a beginner yoga class, if you have a local one where you could be around, people and a good teacher, to go to a beginner's yoga class. There's obviously so much stuff online, that you can try. And if you're somebody that has a lot of physical injuries, it can be very useful to have, eyes of a seasoned teacher on you so that you're making sure your alignment is good and all of that stuff. But yeah, that's why I created Yoga Doctors TV, which is my website, about 100 plus yoga videos on there. And it's specifically, a lot of the practices are all levels, but it just really depends on, what you're going for, and the style of yoga. And I would say the beginning is try different teachers, try different styles of yoga, see what resonates, see what feels good in your body, see what feels balancing, for your body, because it's going to be different for everybody.
Yeah, that makes sense. So just kind of getting started, personalized approach. Working with coach is always good. So it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, not to if you go to a class and you don't like the teacher, you didn't like that style, just try different teachers and try different classes, because I really believe there's like a style of yoga and teachers for everybody. And so just because you don't like one or a class doesn't resonate with you, just keep trying, just keep experimenting if you're brand new.
Yeah, definitely. Like always listen to your inner guidance. Like even if it's a yoga teacher or any type of healer, like you have to make sure the person resonates with you, and you want to make sure you have a good connection so you can actually get the most out of practice.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so let's transition into a little bit into you do something called somatic parenting, uh,
Reparent.
somatic reparenting, right? Uh, so I know it's like a lot of trauma based. Is that correct?
Yeah. Yeah. So soma means body. And so somatic therapy is bottom up approach, so meaning body to brain. So if you think of like talk therapy is like a top down approach, meaning we do mindset work and it's like brain to body. Somatic therapy is the opposite, so it's where we're addressing at the body level, at the nervous system level, to change our thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. So that's somatic, that's the word somatic. And then reparenting is, I like to say it is like learning how to become the secure parent for inner child that maybe you never had, and
Yeah.
somatic reparenting, which is my method that I've created, and after just integrating all the things that I've studied over the last 20 plus years, is somatic reparenting is subconscious mind reprogramming. It's retrieving the younger parts of the self that might be, I like to say, emotionally frozen in time, and integrating, resolving and integrating those younger parts into your present day being, and really learning, because the inner child, the wounded inner child, is so connected to our nervous system. And so it's learning how to, yeah, integrate these parts that, a lot of times for people, have been screaming for their attention for quite some time. Or you might find the wounded inner child sort of running the show, which looks like a lot of dramatic, it looks like drama, it looks like tantrum, or like protest behavior, like it looks like very dramatic emotional reactions. If you have that and you're not really sure why, it's typically the inner child like trying to get your attention for something. So yeah, it's a
Yeah,
whole body of work, and I feel like it's a really beautiful pathway to self-love and compassion.
absolutely. I mean, a lot of like most people don't understand like a lot of decisions that they make, whether stuck in patterns or habits. It's not necessarily them right now. It's things that happened in the past, most often in childhood. So
Mhm.
this might be an interesting question, but like, what is the root of trauma for people? Like, I know it's like there's so much variation within that, but like, what causes people to get off target and kind of like separate from that love, if you will?
That's like disconnect from love. That's a good way to say it. Yeah, like Gabor Mate, he says, trauma is not what happened to us, but how we digest, what happens inside of us from the event. It's not the event itself. I also a lot of times describe it as it's like an incomplete response, like trauma is an incomplete response of our nervous system's natural survival based response. So if you think of like a little kid, that was neglected or abused or whatever, that couldn't fight back, or, didn't have the ability to run away when they wanted to run away, that creates trauma in the body, because our nervous system's natural survival based response would have been to fight back, or would have been to run away, right? And so happen whenever that natural response doesn't get to happen, that sympathetic energy, meaning that stress, gets stuck in the body, gets stuck in the fascia and in the tissues of the body, and the emotional repression that happens over years and often decades, for people, has very real, physical implications in the body, and can show up as physical injuries, and fascial adhesions, and all this type of stuff. That I got really interested in that because I very much started in, the physical therapy world, and was that interest of always getting to the root of people's pain was always high on my list. And when I realized, like, well, if we don't address the unresolved trauma that's having this major impact on the nervous system, that's keeping the body in a dysregulated state. And we know that if the body's in a dysregulated state, meaning chronically in fight, flight, or freeze, then there's no system of the body that can heal, in that state. Like, we have to be in what's called a ventral vagal state, which is that calm, present, relaxed state for every single system of the body to heal. So meaning, when we're in that ventral vagal state, when we're in that regulated state, our we'll have less brain fog, our muscle tension will be down, our pain will be down, our digestion will work well. It's like it literally affects every system of the body. And so once I learned that, I was like, oh, well, that's why, like, the nervous system has to be this kind of overarching umbrella of all the work, that I do. Because if we're missing the nervous system, and you're trying to heal the physical body, it's a bit of a miss.
Definitely. There's a saying that says like our issues are in our tissues, right? So
Yep.
I'm like, when you work with people, how often do you see just by like resolving emotional, mental issues that they have physical relief in terms of that connection?
A lot of the time, actually. And I would say too, for somebody that has had, if anyone's listening that has had chronic pain, or like chronic digestive issues, those are all like, for those, number one priority needs to be nervous system regulation. Because if you can be doing all of the work in the world. And if you're not addressing the nervous system, then your pain levels are going to be high, your muscle tension is going to be high, right? And your digestion isn't going to work well, emotional and physical digestion. And so it's like, literally, when I say it affects every system of the body, it's like, that's why it has to be this, especially people with chronic pain and chronic digestive issues. You have to address it at that root level of the nervous system, because we know now, it's science, research based, that when the vagus nerve is working well, it's like telling our gut that like all is well, you can do your job. If we're dysregulated and fight, flight, or freeze response all the time, then the body's not getting that message, and so everything will start getting backed up and nothing's really working optimally like we would want it to be.
Yeah, that makes sense. I always say there's an emotional root cause for all types of chronic diseases, no matter what it is. You said something really interesting. That's emotional digestion. That's because like when we feel things, it is kind of like a digestive process, right? And a lot of people aren't doing it very well, unfortunately. And like, why are people not able to process in such a way that is healing and in a way that is generative to kind of get to the next level, so to speak?
I think the really simple answer to that is we're not taught. We haven't been taught how. Like, I have a lot of people say to me, the work that you're doing is cutting edge and all this stuff, and I'm like, I get that because of our healthcare system. And what's really true is, like, I'm teaching basics. Like, I'm teaching felt sense and how to feel somatic sensation, how to be in the body, how the just understanding on a very basic level how the nervous system works, so we know what to do with ourselves when we're triggered and how to bring ourselves back to a regulated state. And so it's like, yes, it's cutting edge, and in my opinion, it should have been taught to us in probably like middle school or high school, instead of like, I don't know, stupid math or whatever stuff we don't ever use like ever again. It's just like, here's your body, here's how it's run by the nervous system, here's how to be emotionally intelligent, here's how to authentically relate to people, and here's how to be embodied. Like, I just feel like it all should have been taught to us like long ago, and it just wasn't. And so that's why there's people like me just like spreading this stuff as far and as wide as we can, because it's like every human should know this stuff. Like, it just shouldn't be, like secretive information. This should be information that every human is walking around knowing, that how what to do with ourselves, and how I think it can provide so much relief for people to really understand how the nervous system works, and how it's really just like this 24/7 surveillance system that is always scanning for cues of threat or safety, and it's not going to stop doing its job. Like, that's the job, of the nervous system. And so it's not going to stop doing that. And so I feel like what a lot of people tell me is that it provides a lot of, once they understand that, it can provide them a lot of relief, and even a lot of, I would say, like, less self-blame and self-criticism, because people can get very hard on themselves for, why haven't I healed this by now? Or why does this thing still trigger me? And, people get very hard on themselves of thinking they should be further down the road than they are. And so I feel like it just taking a step back and really understanding this, like, meat suit that we're in and how it functions and how it works can often provide a lot of relief.
Yeah, there's a process called unschooling, of course, like because we talk about school system, but like unschooling process, it's really intriguing me because like we kind of can teach them whatever we want to outside of the system, and that because people like deserve to feel empowered and being able to handle ourselves instead of like this victimhood that we see all around, just like not really knowing who we are, what our purpose is, what we want, all these things. Like I really feel should be natural, but we live in a system that dictates that the odds are kind of stacked against us. We don't really understand the path, so it's kind of the matrix, if you will.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is victim mentality. It is is rampant, I would say, for sure, in our society, and also just like people being in like a chronic state of survival, and kind of puts people in that in that defensive, victimized state. And what's really fun for me is like when I can, really help people optimize, their nervous system's capacity to regulate itself, whenever I can help people build capacity in their nervous system again. And it's fun to watch people go from survival mode to creation mode is really what happens, because when we're in survival mode, we're in this defensive state and we're very oriented towards negativity and worst case scenario. But once we get out of that and we're more and more in a regulated state, more and more in, a ventral state, then what's true is that what we have access to then in the mind is positive possibilities and creative solutions, for our life. We can access, I always found this interesting. We can only access curiosity and compassion when we're in a ventral vagal state, when we're in a regulated state.
Yeah, that makes
And
sense.
so it's everything really, for us to be, if you think about being in survival and defense, it's kind of the opposite of being in a sense of curiosity and exploration and like wonder, of your life. And
Yeah.
so it's a really beautiful thing for me to watch, of like people coming out of survival mode and going into, seeing kind of their natural essence come out, and then, I'm getting all these ideas and like creativity is coming through. And then they start kind of doing the thing, putting their energy towards the thing, that they're here to do on the planet, which is just fun to watch.
That's awesome. Yeah. So when you work with people, like what are some fundamental practices that you work in terms of empowerment of the nervous system so they can feel more regulated? As you said, like live on their own path, their own purpose. Like what are some basic things that people need to start doing today?
Well, one of the basic things I would say for people that are newer to the work is learning to develop felt sense. And by that, I mean like developing your awareness of somatic or physical sensation. So people that have had a lot of trauma, people that have experienced years or decades of nervous system dysregulation can be very disconnected from the body, and they can be very dissociated, kind of mentally checked out. And it's not even their fault, it's just a coping mechanism that's happened, from survival strategies as a kid, and then it kind of carries into these adult relationships. And so one of the main things I see is people, they just are extremely disconnected from the body. And so to develop felt sense and enhancing your somatic intelligence, your awareness of physical sensation is massive. And that's a place that we start for sure. Developing, I would say the next thing I would say is, like, as far as basics, is developing what's called your ventral vagal anchors. And Deb Dana talks a lot about this. She's a polyvagal educator, and she talks about basically it's surrounding this is extremely important for people that have been dysregulated for a long time, because the habit is to be very oriented to negativity. So on a daily basis, consciously looking at who are the people, what are the things, the places, the time of day that makes me feel a sense of safety and connection, and beginning to implement those things into your daily life, right? Like connecting with friends who you find safe, and are trustworthy to you, who you feel a sense of connection with. Because, what's true is that we're all just walking around with these social nervous systems, and we all need eye contact and physical touch and connection for our emotional wellness. And so that's very, very true. And what's true is, and I can speak to this from personal experience, being years and years in freeze response, it's like, you'll have so much resistance to wanting to connect with people if you're in a freeze response. It's like you just want to isolate. It's just covers over the head. I don't want to talk. I don't want to move. And so it's, learning to kind of push past your own resistance in a way to begin to connect with people again is really hugely important. And so, yeah, so those are like two of the main things. And then I would say the third thing, and this is what I use personally with people, is called the Safe and Sound Protocol. And that is, it's Dr. Stephen Porges's, he's the guy he's a neuroscientist who created polyvagal theory, which is just how we know the nervous system to work. And basically, it's an acoustic intervention for the vagus nerve. So it's a way that the protocol that I use to help people increase capacity and increase resilience in the nervous system. So that's what I use personally with clients. But I'd say, like, the other two things is oftentimes I would say too, like developing felt sense and, becoming aware of physical sensation. A lot of people that are super disconnected from the body, they actually need some guidance for that. It's not like second nature to them. It's actually very foreign. So to, reach out and ask for support, like hire a mentor or a guide, or a therapist to work with. And I can't tell you how many mentors and guides I've had, over the years have been completely invaluable. But one thing you can start to do for those that are listening is start to write a list. Who are the people that provide me with a sense of safety and connection? What are the places that I can go to that provide that for me? The time of day, like if sunset is your favorite, making sure you go watch sunset every night, or maybe it's sunrise for you, pets can be a part of that co-regulation, surrounding yourself with animals and people that tend to bring your system a sense of connection. And just that co-regulation is massive, and we all really need it.
Absolutely. Yeah, those are some amazing points. Like going back to the first one, I always feel so much better when I'm like in my body working out, doing some type of movement practice, like staying mobile throughout the day, because I just
Mhm.
feel like so much more connected to my mind as well. So I can just stay on point and stay focused, do whatever I need to do, right?
Totally. Yep, exactly. And people don't realize it, and often they're not conscious they're doing this, but exercise, movement, anything like what it's doing is helping us discharge sympathetic energy. And that's what needs to happen. Whether we're in fight, flight, or freeze, sympathetic energy needs to be discharged from the body. And we do that through movement. We do that through breath work. We do that through our sounds and huffing and puffing or mantra or chanting or whatever. Um, all of that is a way to release that stored sympathetic energy, meaning that stressful energy. And so, yeah, totally. It's one of the reasons why working
Yeah.
out, like lifting weights, dancing, yoga, like you can choose your medicine. And however, swimming, my favorite, swimming, hiking, biking, whatever your medicine is that you'll do that works for you. It's just stay with it and implement it, because we were definitely not meant to be as sedentary as most of society is. You think about like the era of hunters and gatherers, like if you don't have a consistent walking practice, I would really encourage you to start walking every single day, because the body is meant to move. It's meant to be walking. And, if you're not somebody that's like, you're not going to go to the gym or something like that, just start a walking practice, because walking also discharges sympathetic energy. Anything rhythmic, so walking, swimming, anything rhythmic helps to calm the limbic brain, the emotional brain. And so that's one of the I would say easiest for somebody that's just like, you're not a super motivated person, you're not going to go to a dance class, you're not going to go to the gym. Just start walking on a daily basis and start deep breathing. You can do mantra on your walk. You can do lots of different things on your walk, but just starting to get out, get into nature more, use your eyes to look around, like do the opposite of what your eyes do when you're looking at a screen, which is like zoning in. Our eyes are very connected to our nervous system. So like when I'm on my walk, I'm kind of like scanning, the environment, and like looking in the distance for birds and things like that. And all of it's really regulating for the system.
Absolutely. I'm really grateful to have like a forest right across the street. I go in every single day. So it's like something I've been able to do over the years. So
The
the second
trees,
point,
the trees are so
you,
grounding.
yeah, definitely. Uh,
Mhm.
the second point, you kind of we're talking about like flow and alignment, being in with people that you care about, people that make you feel empowered. Timing, of course, because a lot of people have like time stress, right? Certain places, just making sure that the person you want to become is in alignment with the way that you're living, so that you can get on track with that. Because what you are to be, you are now becoming, right?
Yeah, totally. I agree with you.
Definitely. And Ron, remind me of that third point you were talking about again. Just to like,
The safe and sound protocol.
yeah, that was, yeah.
Yeah. You want me to expand on it?
Um, just give a brief synopsis of it. Just again, I just want to cover just a little bit more.
Yeah, it's literally like an over the ear headset that you put on, and it's filtered music using specific frequencies that actually targets this ear, this muscle in your middle ear called the stapedius, which gets kind of flattened with trauma. And so what it does
Really?
is it helps target that, and then that's connected to the brainstem, that's connected to the vagus nerve. And what it does is actually helps to lower the threat profile auditorily of like the sounds we're taking in. And so big picture, what it does is that it optimizes the nervous system's ability to regulate itself. So it helps build capacity, build resilience, in the nervous system. And to me, when I found it, I was like, wow, I've been looking for this my whole career. Like I saw it as like something it's it's like a hack for the nervous system, right? It's like a way to fast track someone's physiology that's been dysregulated for a long time.
Awesome. Yeah. Sorry, my dog's going nuts. Yeah, it's really fascinating stuff because like the protocol itself seems like it's really necessary for people that have been in trauma state for a long time. Uh, you were talking about like the mind-body connection there. That was talking about part of the brain where it is uh, deactivated in terms of trauma. So yeah, that was really interesting as well. Last point I wanted to bring up with that was if people wanted to start with that in a process that to overcome trauma in terms of again just getting the process started, like how they do that, and in terms of kind of getting beyond that and going to the next level.
Can you say the question to me again, what you're asking?
Yeah, sure. So what is it that people need to do in order to, I want to say, wake up, so to speak, because of course we're hold on to all this things, and unfortunately I feel like a lot of us kind of get this almost massive wake up call in order to move along their path, but I really don't feel like it has to be like that, right? I don't feel like it should be, but it is. So if we wanted to just start the process uh, gradually, how would we go about that?
Honestly, it comes down to willingness of the person. Because what I say to everybody is that, like, because I get a lot of people that like, oh, I want my spouse or I want my mom or I want my brother, like to do this work, and they like try to like lead the horse to water, so to speak, but like we can't ever make them drink. And so it actually has to come from this. And this is why unfortunately a lot of the times it takes people really hitting, close to their rock bottom, or they've been in overwhelm or shut down or collapse or freeze for a long time, and they just realize like it's affecting their physical health, and they really need to do something differently. But I would say like it takes a level of willingness and a level of, I would never tell anyone it's quick or easy work to like unfuse from the wounded inner child, and build capacity in the nervous system, because what's true is you have to do it in a titrated way. And titration is one of my favorite words. It means like give the system challenging experiences, go into what you might sense as like a challenging emotion, but doing it in small doses, so that it doesn't overwhelm the system, and so that the nervous system slowly builds capacity over time. And so, for somebody to start dipping their toe in the water, I would say to find a therapist or a guide or a coach that is, trauma informed and really understands the nervous system, because that therapeutic relationship can be very important, because what the role of the therapist is really to provide an imprint of secure connection, with the person. Whereas a lot of people with trauma haven't had that, with maybe their caregivers were unpredictable or neglectful, or it was a very insecurely attached relationship. And so that relationship with a therapist can be extremely healing, and oftentimes we what I know to be true is that we really grow from being witnessed, and being
Yeah,
reflected. And a lot of times the wounded inner child, what he or she often needs is I would say acknowledgement of the story they've been holding for so long, acknowledgement of the pain they've been holding for so long. The inner child often needs reassurance, and then just a new level of like love and care, that your current adult self like needs to get to this place where you come to that decision in and of yourself of like, okay, I'm ready to do something different. I'm ready to grow and evolve and no one can sort of like push you into doing that work because it'll fall flat after, some weeks or months if it's someone else's choice for you. Like I start all of my group programs with having people really connect with like, what's your soul's motivation, for even doing this work? Because,
Yeah.
if you're not really connected to that, like, you'll lose steam, you'll lose motivation fairly quickly, because the work has its ups and downs innately, and the work will bring up self-doubt, and it's going to bring up, unprocessed emotions, that need to be felt. And so it's coming to a place inside yourself where you're like willing and like ready to do something different and to mature and to grow. And I like to say, is how I see it, it's like learning to live your life from the perspective of your nervous system, when you feel ready to, this is how I say it, stop bulldozing over the pace of your nervous system, stop
Yeah.
bulldozing over what the body actually needs, which is typically a lot more movement and a lot more rest than most people give it.
Yeah, that's an amazing point. I often ask myself the question, what would a free man do? Meaning, like, what are the things I need to do right now in order to be the most free? Like, because there's so many things that are going on. We always have the choice to live from the inside out or the outside in, right? So essentially, choosing empowerment in the face of adversity, I feel, is really important.
Hmm. Yeah, that's a great way to say it. I see all of this work as like learning to hold and learning to empower yourself at the deepest level, and that's what that work of, when I say becoming the secure parent, for your inner child, it's like that's what that work is. So that no matter what comes at you, the core wound of abandonment or betrayal or rejection, like that can be extremely intense on the system, that you've got yourself, you know that you can hold yourself through it, and you have these tools and these skills to parent this scared or angry little child inside of you that has just probably needed your attention for quite some time.
Absolutely. Yeah. We talk about holding this space, kind of like this safe container for the inner child. And so we can kind of express ourselves fully, because a lot of it, we're carrying on these limiting beliefs, limiting shame, guilt, all these things that are kind of not serving us. It's these old things that happened in the past. And when we hold on to that, like, it's kind of like dragging us down, so to speak, and we're not able to live our best life. So that's why it's so important to like be secure within yourself, feel empowered, have all these principles and character traits that you're able to live in such a way that is empowering, because otherwise you're just going to live a subpar life, unfortunately, and not live up to your full potential. And I believe that everyone has the capacity to live up to their full potential. It just like what is holding us back and what we need to get there, you know?
Totally. Yeah. I always tell people that, because I get a lot of people that come to me in a very disempowered state, they feel very powerless or hopeless. And I always say to them, just, you know, you can borrow my belief like in your power, or borrow my trust that I have in you, like seeing someone's, because I really see like, I just, I see the trauma that needs to be worked through, but I also just see the soul there and the potential that's there. And so it's just, I often tell people like, it's okay. Like if you don't feel it, all it really takes is like, if you can access like 10% of like accessing a thread of light amidst the darkness, if you can access just 10%, it's really all it takes is just accessing the smallest bit of light can like pull you out like of a dark night of a soul. And to have a lot of, I think this work takes a lot of compassion, a lot of self-compassion, and understanding that the wounded inner child didn't get there for no reason. And really is like this, if you can imagine this like your favorite little kid, how you would speak to your favorite little kid that's scared or angry or throwing a tantrum or whatever. It's like that's often how we need to begin talking to these parts of ourself, that are a lot of times screaming for our attention.
Yeah, awesome. Like, just get the ball rolling, because I know my mission and yours as well is like to be the light, as you said, like so we can be like these practitioners that people can look towards to not act as like a guru, but more as a guide, so we can empower people, so then they become that type of thing as well. Because then more light spreads more light, and just kind of it's just a virtuous circle that just gets bigger and bigger as we get better.
Totally. Yeah. And I was just saying this to the client I was talking to before I jumped on this, which was like when we can learn when we're more in a regulated state in the nervous system, what's true is that when we walk around, and it can be as simple as like, you know, connecting briefly to the grocery store clerk, you know, having a smile or a little connection, like that can actually help create a sense of safety, you know, and connection in someone's system. And so what's true about nervous system work is that when you become more regulated, most of the time you can walk around like this little light, you know, for people, and they can, without knowing it, because it happens, you know, automatically, their system will detect safety, you know, versus threat.
Definitely, because I feel like a lot of us in our head a lot, and we're kind of stuck in our past stories, maybe knowingly or unknowingly. We have these things going on, and because of that, we're not able to serve to our highest capacity. And just, really, like you just said, like get out of our head, just connect to what's around us. And because when we do that, we're going to realize like we're in the present moment and not in the past, and things aren't, because what happened to us is really in the past. And if we stay in this present moment, then it's a much more safer place. Just being able to connect what's around you and just kind of add value in that type of way, because that just gets you out of the trauma cycle and gets you more of a virtuous circle, you know?
Totally. And like what you're speaking to of like having presence is this is why the body connection is so important, because if you can connect to the body and what is currently happening in your body and what your physical eyes can see, you can show your nervous system that you're safe, you know, in the moment. And so that's the beauty of embodiment work.
Absolutely. So like the more love that you have within yourself, you're much more able to serve to a higher capacity and just be able to almost have a consciousness that is able to serve and just be more balanced. I'm trying to say just be more of a light, and just people know, like people are around you, like, because energy is contagious. Like the more because this type of work, it's not for faint of heart. Like overcoming trauma, overcoming all these things, it definitely takes courage. It takes all of you becoming the greatest version of yourself, and then expanding that outwards. So we kind of change the vibration of the planet, so to speak.
100%. Yep. Totally.
Awesome. All right. Dr. Summer, this has been amazing. I know we talked about nervous system, we talked about trauma, we talked about the sound method. Just, are there any final points you'd like to wrap up with to get out to the people in such a way?
What I always like to convey to people is for them to understand is that like you can stop blaming yourself for your triggers. And because people are so hard on themselves, they make themselves so wrong for feeling the way that they do, and it's just unproductive. It's just not really
I
necessary.
mean, we add
And
trauma on top of the trauma.
exactly, it's like throwing the second dart at yourself. It's
Yeah.
like, yeah, and so it's just not necessary. It's just understanding, like starting to take in like my nervous system's actually just doing its job, and like if I can understand that more and more, I can like take away that like negative self-talk or criticism that comes with it.
It is unfortunate, but it's kind of comical what we do sometimes. Like just kind of, I don't know, just perpetuate it, right? So if people want to learn more about you and what you do, where can they go? How can they connect with you?
Yeah, I'm pretty active on Instagram. It's my handle's dr_summer SOMER_Nicole. Or my website that can gives a little synopsis of my personal healing 6-month program and my facilitator training that's 9 months is www.soma healingcollective.com.
Awesome. Yeah, I definitely recommend it. She does great work, and definitely need more of this on the planet. So I appreciate you.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
All right. Awesome.